The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 15th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. I was just thinking this morning that if you include Lenten series on this particular reading, and also the summer at day camp where this was one of our daily stories, I have probably spent more time with this particular story than any other parable. And I think from that experience that there are basically 2 ways you can go. One way you can go is that you can simplify the story, and then you pair it up with, there's a story about a lost sheep and a story about a lost coin, and it becomes very simple. Lost things are found, and then you celebrate. But also, you can make it a lot more complicated, and guess which one I now prefer. The more time I spend with this family, I just think they get more and more interesting. This father and his two sons. The more time you spend with them, I think the more you see their flaws, but they're also more relatable. They really start to feel like real people and not just sermon illustrations. I think that's a sign of a good parable. It is both simple and complicated. The younger son is almost a caricature of an obnoxious, spoiled younger sibling. Any older sibling can recognize that. He embarrasses the entire family by demanding his share of the inheritance. He then foolishly spends it all. He is obviously not a role model that anyone should try to follow, but still, it's not actually his fault that there is a famine in the entire land, right? One guy making bad choices can't cause that. He seems like he learned something from his experience. It's not very clear when he comes home if he has truly changed or if he's just hungry and so he's making smarter choices, but either way, he seems a bit wiser. Meanwhile, the older son starts off looking like the dutiful, reliable one, but he spoils that at the end when he reveals he is just as foolish and impulsive as his brother. He insults his father when he refuses to go to the party. And that also serves to embarrass the entire family in front of the neighbors. But it's easy to feel for him. He more or less has to be the dutiful, boring, reliable, good son in order to make up for his younger brother. When the neighbors talked about younger brother, who do you think had to listen to that? Meanwhile, here's the poor father, and he is running around desperately trying to keep both of his sons happy without ever telling either one of them no. This one, I think, is harder to see because we're used to being told, well, the father is like God, and if the father is like God, he must be the good guy, right? But I don't think the story is quite that simple because the father in the story is just not very effective. He's supposed to have raised both of his sons to be better than this. He's supposed to be an authority figure in the household. Authority figures do not run around after their sons. Authority figures make other people run. But still, they are his sons. If he doesn't run to greet his younger son, somebody else might greet him first. Where by greet, I basically mean attack, because younger son is not popular around here. The neighbors are all very worried that their younger sons might start getting ideas. And then, if he doesn't run to his older son and get him to make nice at the party, then the party isn't going to do anything to salvage the family's reputation. Instead, it's just going to make this disaster even worse. So you can't really blame him for running around trying to patch things up, even though he doesn't seem to be very good at it. There is a lot at stake here. In that culture, a family's reputation is everything they have to depend on. In other words, the more I look, the more I think that this family is just as dysfunctional as the family in Encanto, only with a lot less singing. And also, if you've seen Encanto, there's a great moment where the whole community comes together to support the family. Well, that is not happening here because the surrounding community doesn't like them that much. The surrounding community is not going to show up and also rebuild the house and sing a song. That is not happening. Nobody is coming. Nobody is going to help this father and his two sons. They are on their own with the mess that they have made. They're not completely doomed yet, but they have a lot of work to do. This is not such a great ending to the story until you remember where Jesus comes in. Jesus is the one telling the story. And Jesus does not leave people like this family alone to deal with their own mess. Jesus comes and he gets involved in the mess with them. That's why he spends so much time with sinners. Because messy, dysfunctional, lost people, like the characters in the story, are exactly who Jesus came to save. Saving sheep and coins is easy, but saving people can get complicated because people are like that. We all have simple, basic needs, like the need to feel safe, the need to be loved. But our needs interact with each other and with the needs of other people in complicated ways. Family is probably the most basic unit of human relationship. Relationships in a family start out as simple and as obvious as a father with two sons. You can see that they are connected to each other. They act a bit alike. They even look alike. But human relationships don't ever stay that simple because we build up these whole complicated structures of loyalty and resentment, duty and rebellion, affection and frustration, expectation and disappointment. So family can bring out the very best in us and the very worst, sometimes at the same time. I always say if you think that your family is normal, you just haven't found out yet. That's the story of humanity. We are capable of such ugliness and such beauty. So it's not just the same people, but the same relationships that can bring out both. And that is the story that Jesus doesn't just tell, he enters into it. In some ways, Jesus himself plays the role of all three main characters. Like the older son, Jesus has always obeyed the will of his Father. Like the younger son, Jesus chooses to make his home in places where he isn't automatically welcome. Like the Father, Jesus is willing to do whatever it takes to save the people he loves, even if it makes him look foolish or weak. But unlike the older son, Jesus remains obedient to the end. Unlike the younger son, Jesus does not waste his inheritance. Unlike the Father, Jesus' efforts are not fruitless. By entering into the story of the Father and two sons, Jesus enters our human story. Jesus enters all human stories. and he transforms all human stories. By becoming human himself, Jesus reconciles humans with God, and he enables us to be reconciled with one another. So it only makes sense that he will hang out with the people who most need reconciliation. Lost children, lost parents, lost families, lost communities, lost congregations, lost people. Complicated and simple, ugly and beautiful, messy and wonderful people. That's who Jesus is here with. And that's who Jesus is here for. Jesus is here for the younger son. Jesus is here for the older son. Jesus is here for the father. And Jesus is here for the servants and the neighbors and the tax collectors and scribes and Pharisees also. Jesus is here for us. So in his name, all God's people say, Amen.